Welcome to Standing on the Edge. This is your host, Randy Saplata. Today is Thursday, January 13th, and today we will talk about Here We Go Again on the Edge of the Coin. We also have the topic of stop thinking in terms of a job during Think Like the Rich. And today's personal story will be about so is the world going to hell in a handbasket or is it not? Finally, as always, we'll finish off the show with what would happen if. By the way, if you like the content presented here and in other videos that I have, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up, that like button, smash anything possible that you possibly can, so that YouTube will go ahead and keep me around for a while, as well as Facebook too, which is now called Meta, as most of you know. Anyway, you are listening to Standing on the Edge. When we come back, it's time for the Edge of the Coin here on Standing on the Edge. And welcome back to the show. The Edge of the Coin is brought to you by the CS Media Group. We provide the outstanding talent, and you get the extraordinary entertainment. Now, the Edge of the Coin is a way of opening up our mindsets to allow us to explore any situation from both sides. We're going to jump right into today's topic, which is called Here We Go Again. Excuse me. Here we go again. What do I mean by this? Well, for those of you who have been around for a while and you've seen me on the videos, my show Standing on the Edge has actually broadcast in 39 different countries all over the world for about the last year and a half or so. And a lot of you realize that my topics are not designed for basically anything except for looking at different viewpoints. That's pretty much it. And you can go ahead and take this viewpoint that I have and give it to just about anything that I got. So what do I mean by here we go again? Well, here we go again. We're in a brand new year, okay? And I keep hearing that the topical jokes, so to speak, that we're not in the year 2022. We are in 2022, as in 2020 2.0. And that's not quite the case. However, in some ways it is. In 2020, we found out that basically the United States government went exactly the same way as every other dictator in the world did, can, would, and has in the past as well. In other words, history repeated itself at that point, okay? And what do I mean by that? Well, 2020 was a landmark year. It showed that all of a sudden the government was no longer willing to be ruled by the people and do things for the people to be able to give the benefits to the people. It was no longer that way. They went ahead and showed their true colors, which is the government is for the government. Now, that being said, there's always a different story in certain times. There's always exceptions to that rule. It's not everybody is bad or everybody is good. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of bad, there's a lot of good, and there's a lot of in between that's going on. So standing on the edge, or the edge of the coin, is where I want you to stand so you can see both the good and the bad, as well as everything in between, and make up your own minds to do it. But in 2020, like I said, the government decided that it was for the government to be ruled by the government, to give the benefits to the government. And that was it. And the way they went ahead and expressed that is they basically went ahead and said, we're going to do things that we know is best for us. Nobody else knows how to decide this. We are the best ones at doing this, and therefore we're going to go ahead and take control. And basically, they not just attempted, but they tried to distract us with a potential coup while they actually physically went ahead and took over in their own coup in doing so, and then went ahead and forced us to try to stay home, forced us to try to not work, forced us to try to go ahead and work to live off of one way of spending our currency that we have. And finally, basically went ahead and pretty much outlawed anybody that did anything different. I mean, they went so far to the extreme of you could be fined and jailed or both for going outside to walk your dog in the fresh air where there's nobody around for a block and a half. But you could still be fined and you could still be jailed for going out without your mask and fined and thrown in jail. I'm sure I said that again anyway, but just for doing something that is healthy. If that's not messed up, I don't know what is. Jump forward 2022, 2 years later, and we've still got the government trying to go, well, we're going to go ahead and keep our thumbs on you because we got a new virus coming out or a new variant of the virus in doing so. And therefore, you really should go ahead and continue doing the controls and the restrictions that we put on you. Well, back in 2020, I warned that it was not a new thing. Basically, all it was that the government was taking like a wrench and they were tightening up their control of what's going on. Now, I don't know about you, okay? I am not pro-government. I'm not anti-government either because I don't want anarchy whatsoever. What I do want, however, is for the government to recognize that I can make my own intelligent decisions. I can make my own intelligent decisions and decide if I want to go ahead and do something healthy for myself in a way that's going to benefit myself and possibly other people as well, rather than somebody tell me, you don't know what to think. You don't know how to think. You are stupid. And that's basically what they said. In 2022, now, all they're doing is they're trying to go ahead and hold on to as much control as they possibly can. And this is not just Democrats. This is Republicans also, and the people that are in the power as we speak at the moment. Okay, so it's not just one side or the other. It's anybody that's in power. And again, there are some exceptions. There are certain people out there that truly are really, really wanting to help their people, and therefore they're trying to make the best decisions in terms of their constituents that are there. But for 99% of the case, that is for 99% of the government, that is not the case. And the rest of them are going, well, you guys just leave it to us. We'll take care of it. Or you guys don't know what you're talking about. You don't know how to think. You don't know how to act. And you haven't been schooled properly. And therefore, we're going to go ahead and impose all these new rules on you that are completely restricted to you. And because we feel that we know better than you do in how to do that. Okay. Now, honestly, I want you to understand one thing. Okay. I am not a super mega rich person. All right. I'd like to be. I'm striving to be. But if I ever get there, the one thing I'm not going to do is tell anybody below me that you have to stay where you're at. You have to stay with what you're doing because you don't know what's going on. What I will say is this. There's a warning here. You cannot think the same way as you did where you are now, and as you do where you are now. There is a huge learning curve that you have to go through, and it is very dangerous if you try to go ahead and do something and don't know how to work the process. This is true no matter where you are in the world, no matter what socioeconomic class you happen to be in, or caste if you're in India or in another country of that nature. It doesn't matter. If you plan on getting out of the events and the situations that you're in now, you have to think differently. Here we go again. In 2022, we are basically trying to have people in the government that are saying, hold on a little bit tighter, hold on a little bit longer, hold on to as much power as you possibly can and just mess everything up as much as possible, so that way, even if we lose power or lose control of the power in 6 or 8 months or 10 months, as the case may be, because at the end of the year there's another election here in the United States. It's going to go ahead and probably flip-flop and turn itself over. But if the people in power try to go ahead and mess things up as much as possible, it's not because they're wanting to screw the country over. Most of the time, the way they're thinking is this: if we do the damage now, it's going to make it much more difficult for the next person to clean up. And that, again, is messed up. So here we go again. What do we do about this? How do we pick up the pieces, which is my theme song for this particular show? And it's a wonderful show, or wonderful song. For you and I, the people that are not in government, for you and I, the people that are not uber rich, for you and I that are not supremely poor and have no control over anything, this is talking to you. Basically, what's happened in the last couple of years, and definitely over the last 10 years, is that we have had and watched our middle class, which used to be the hugest part of our nation and our economy. And it has grown from the big fat belly that it was into an hourglass shape, squeezing it out. And so you were forced either up into the upper class, or more likely you were forced down into the lower classes. And depending on how you talk or who you talk to, it might be 3 classes, it might be 4 or even 5 classes that are going on. Most of them, however, are in the bottom section of that hourglass rather than in the top section of the hourglass. And if you want to go ahead and squeeze through into that upper section, it's much tighter because of those controls that have been put forth. You have to go along, quote unquote, with the flow in order to go ahead and try to do so, or basically break out of that hourglass and do something totally different. If you go with the flow, it does not guarantee that you're going to make it into the top sections, because you might, even though you do everything correctly, you might not have enough oomph or enough attraction to the people that are in that power section to go ahead and let them allow you to come through. If you try to break out and you go the absolute opposite direction, then you run the risk of having the people in power focus on you and say, okay, you are a dissenter. You are a terrorist. You are a person that doesn't like to break the rules. You are a criminal, and they will go ahead and lock you away for a certain period of time. Well, you can't do much in jail. Okay? Really. I'm sorry. There are, for all intents and purposes, for all the people that are going on and having these live reality TV shows and getting supposedly lots of money because they got their fame coming in, or the people that you find that went ahead and went to jail for something that was goofy, silly, whatever you want to go ahead and call it, and they're now out of jail and they're using that to go ahead and boost their promotions. They're the people that know how to do it. They're the ones that are using it to their advantage. Most people cannot, will not, and do not do so. So once again, you've got to think in different ways, in different directions, in different possibilities, and be able to go ahead and do this. There's always been this scenario, throughout history, ever since Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden along with their kids. They got kicked out of the Garden of Eden because they decided they wanted to do something different. And they were labeled terroristic. They were labeled whatever you want to go ahead and call it. They were criminals. They were not allowed to stay in utopia. Now, I know I've just been labeled as a heretic for all of my Christian friends, in doing so. But basically, that's what it was. And they got booted out of the system to try to go ahead and make their way in another area, in another section of the world, in another fashion, in another economy, and they had to go ahead and do things in a much more difficult way. This has been true, like I said, since basically the dawn of time as to what's been going on. So here we go again. It's happening. However, this time, unfortunately, what's happening here in the United States is only a small portion of what's going on in the rest of the world. Why? Because so much of the rest of the world right now has decided to go ahead and attach themselves or throw a lifeline connecting to the United States or peg their currency to the US dollar or to be able to go ahead and fashion their government after our government and do the exact same things. Well, if we've done the same thing that losers have done in the past, dictators have done in the past, that economies that did not work in the past, and we're modeling our government in that exact same fashion, where are we going to go? We're going to lose. And if other people are fashioning themselves upon how we do things now, they're going to lose. So where does that leave us? Basically, it leaves us in a big mess. And here's my prediction for 2022. There's going to be some huge winners. There's going to be some huge losers. There's going to be some people that kind of have to pick up the mess in doing so. But if you do it the correct way, the people picking up the mess can go ahead and fashion for themselves a very, very nice lifestyle. However, in order to do so, you're going to have to run the risk that you label yourself as a criminal, that you are labeled as a criminal, that you are labeled as a dissenter, you are labeled as a terrorist, and or you have to find a way to go ahead and keep out of sight in doing so, which means you're going to start up your own black market. Plain and simple. Now, am I suggesting you do so? No. Am I suggesting that you don't do so? No. I'm suggesting that you do what is right for you. I'm suggesting that you do what is right for you. I'm suggesting that I do what is right for me. So if you need to go ahead and find out real quickly where you can get a piece of land and hide 90% of your wealth and go on to do the things that are a little bit iffy, but they're not illegal on the surface, and then have another underground business in doing so, then that's up to you. But again, you have to understand the risks involved and understand that there is a chance that sooner or later something's going to happen and people are going to go ahead and say to you or to the government, hey, there's a criminal over here and he's not really doing anything bad that we see, but there's just something not right about him. That's what you got to prepare for. So once again, here we go again. It's up to you to decide what you are going to do. And by the way, for those of you that are going, well, I can just go ahead and stay as it is, and we'll go ahead and we got free money coming in, and we have, the government knows what it's doing, and therefore it's been around for 200 years. They got to know what's happening. The people that started the government 200 years ago were in a 180-degree opposite direction from where we are right now. So the government right now does not know what it's doing. I believe the government right now is trying extremely hard to go ahead and get away from where we started this country up to begin with. That's what I want you to figure out. You are listening to Standing on the Edge. When we come back, it's time to think like the rich. Welcome back to the show. Think Like the Rich is brought to you by Hers Decadence, offering luxurious refreshment for your body inside and out. You need to treat your body and to that of your lover to a bit of luxury from Hers. We got, believe it or not, very quickly, Valentine's Day coming up on us. So you can go ahead and find out what's available for Valentine's Day by emailing Heather at hersdecadence@gmail.com. Now, Think Like the Rich is a segment designed to help everyone think past their circumstances and encourage a different course of action. Today's topic is stop thinking in terms of a job. There's so many different viewpoints on how people should live their life. And unfortunately, there are too many busybodies that do the exact same thing. They keep thinking, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Just leave it to the professionals. Just let them handle things. Let them go on when, and we're going to go ahead and keep our nose down, and we're going to stay at our jobs, and we're going to go ahead and grind out every bit of money that we possibly can so we can go ahead and afford to pay our bills. Okay. Now that's great. It really is. If that's how you're going to go ahead and survive throughout turmoil that happens to be, which has not changed for the last, 6,000 years or so, then that's perfectly fine. But understand that it does not take two people to start a war. It only takes one. It only takes one person to decide, you have, whoever that person might be, you have something that I want, and I am going to forcibly take it from you in some way. And that's what starts the war. So if that's the case, then thinking like the rich is going to be a totally different concept for you. If you decide to participate in that war because you are trying to defend yourself from the person that is stealing from you in whatever way it might be a physical break-in, taking all of your items that you've got. It might be stealing from your wallet because they're supplying taxes in forms that you just don't understand. It might be in the terms of inflation, where prices are going up so high and your job has not paid you more to keep up with those prices, price increases. It might be that you can't go ahead and go anywhere because you've been restricted into a small area and you're not, quote unquote, allowed to travel anywhere that you want to, like you used to just a couple of years ago. Whatever the case may be, these restrictions are the one side of the coin that is starting that war, because they want to be able to control as much as they possibly can. If you let them, if you go along with what they're saying, it does not mean that you are at peace. What it means is that you have allowed them to drag you into their war and be controlled by what they want. Now, this also is true of jobs. Don't get me wrong. Jobs are necessary. Okay? Jobs are absolutely necessary. I feel that anybody has a right to either work or not to work. And if they want to pay their bills, they're going to have to go ahead and make their income some way. Most of the time, jobs are necessary because they perform a necessary function. But again, I want people to understand what they're getting into. A job, all it is a swap for your time. And because you're using up your time to work somebody else's job, they are compensating you in some way to allow you to pay your bills. Okay? That's the way the world works, plain and simple. You do not have to have a job. You do not have to have a high-paying job or a low-paying job. That is up to you, whether you decide to go ahead and create your own job or to start up a business that has jobs for other people to work in, or to go ahead and sell your time to somebody else so that you can work for them and they compensate you. Now, here's a little example. Just the other day, I came across a working farm for sale. It was here in Cobb County, working farm for sale. They wanted to go ahead and have it. They were selling it for a little over $1 million to do so. 5 acres of prime land, prime real estate, all of it workable as a farm. They had 5,000 customers to go ahead and sell to that were utilizing this particular farm in doing so. And that is great. If I decide I want to go ahead and purchase that farm, then I can go ahead and trade the little bit of money that I've got into that along with other investors to go ahead and do so. But if I decide after purchasing that farm that I want to be the sole person working that farm, then I am trading my time for that farm. And it's controlling me. If, however, I decide that I want to go ahead and work the farm and I want to make it available to as many people as possible, not just to those 5,000 customers, but potentially grow it even more than that, then I am going to have to find a way to work the farm without myself. I have to hire other people to go ahead and work this business, hence the jobs. If I want to go ahead and do that, that means I have to be able to entice people to come and do this, however it may end up being. I am therefore creating jobs in an economy that needs jobs. And this is a good thing. And most of the time, thinking like the rich is exactly like thinking like that farm business. I can either farm it for myself and keep all the profits and use all the profits and find out that 99% of it or more is going to waste because I can't eat it all. Or I can go ahead and farm all of that by myself and I can go ahead and try to sell it off to the public and have a small business and go ahead and make a little, keep a little bit for myself to eat and have quite a bit coming in, hopefully, that people want to go ahead and purchase from me. But at that point, that depends on whether or not anybody actually wants the items from the farm or not. And that's plain and simple. Are they hungry enough for it or are they not hungry enough for it? Or I can do the third option, which I went ahead and mentioned again a minute ago. Think like the rich, to where I am keeping a tiny little bit of it for myself. I'm hiring a lot of other people to do the physical labor for me. I'm hiring a lot of people to go ahead and sell the product. I'm hiring people to go ahead and to farm the land. I'm hiring people to go ahead and create other jobs available, such as, the people that are trying to sell cattle and try to sell products to me, to be the fertilizer to me to be able to go ahead and utilize for putting down onto the land itself to make it more liable to be able and more able basically to be able to go ahead and continue as a business. But I have stepped out of the business itself, let other people run that business while I go ahead and control what's going on and decide whether or not to go ahead and either expand that business into other areas or to start another business. And this is exactly how the rich think. So if you want to break through to the other side that I was talking about last segment, and from that hourglass shape from the bottom to go ahead and get into the top itself, this is how you got to start thinking right here. This is most important. It is very, very super easy to do, but you've got to figure out how to do it. And if you're not used to thinking that way, you need to find others who have done it in the past and are willing to go ahead and help you get to that point. Now, there's a Shark Tank investor, Kevin O'Leary, that I like to watch, okay? And personally, I think that when it comes to watching Shark Tank, they all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses, they've all got their different ways of doing things. But Kevin O'Leary understands most of the time that it's not about making or keeping all of the profits. Profits are important. Profits are very important. But it's how quickly can you get into a business and get back out of that business so you can get into another business to get out of that business, to get into a third business to get out, and then just the process repeats. He physically does what I've been trying to tell you about for the last year and a half, to think like the rich. Because if you invest into a business and you say, I'm going to stay in this business forever and a day, and I'm going to go ahead and grow it as far as I can go ahead and grow it, and then I'm going to go ahead and sell it, and I'm going to sit back and just relax and go, oh, it's time to go play tennis, then you're thinking like a small business owner. Albeit maybe a wealthy small business owner, but you're still thinking like a small business owner. The rich don't own anything. They might own a portion of things, but it allows them to go ahead and collect the money that they have invested into that particular area and arena and collect it all and bring it out and put it into another arena, which still puts them basically either looking like the middle class or sometimes even the poor because they don't have a lot of stuff. They don't have the fancy cars. They don't necessarily have a huge house. They don't necessarily have a very large income statement because they might not be bringing in a lot of money. They might only have enough money to cover their expenses and then some. But if they're not working to cover their expenses, if their business covers their expenses, and they're moving on to a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth business, then all the rest of the income that's coming in is being controlled by them. And that's the secret that the rich either can't tell people, or if they decide they want to tell people, that the other side of the coin just don't understand because they're not thinking in terms of that concept. So if you want to go ahead and think like the rich, this is what I'm talking about. You got to start switching your mindset out. Now, why did I bring up Kevin O'Leary? Because not only does he understand that concept, he also understands too that if you've got a business you want to go ahead and have control of, it doesn't matter if you have all of the control or a little control. If the business is successful and you are learning as you go along, you can start the same thing over again and have more control over that next business. So if you've got a successful business, but you don't know how to get it to the next level, you're going to need to bring somebody in that knows more than you do, okay? If you have to give up 70% of the business in order to learn these things, do it. Because let me think of it. Let's think of it this way, okay? If your highly successful business is bringing in $400,000 or $500,000 a year, that's a really successful business, okay? $500,000 is a successful business, and you've grown it to that point, and you've got 100% of that, okay? But if the person you want to bring in can help you move it up to $2 million and they want 70% control over it, you're still making the same amount that you did prior to that with 100% control as giving 70% of it away. You're still making the same amount of money and you're learning by leaps and bounds how to do it again, where you can then repeat the process and continue reaping the profits that you had from this one and move on and get that much more profits with the next one. This is how you start to think like the rich. And this is how I want people to understand. You don't have to have a Microsoft in order to do this. You don't have to have a Walmart in order to do this. You don't have to be the owner of Tesla or the owner of Amazon. You don't have to have a huge technology company such as Verizon Wireless. What you have to do is start thinking like they do and then putting into action those same things. This is what you want to do. This is where you want to be. And this is how you think like the rich. You are listening to Standing on the Edge. When we come back, it's time for Tales from the Edge. Welcome back to the show. Tales from the Edge is brought to you by the HRS Foundation, investing in future generations to ensure a better tomorrow. Tales from the Edge is a shared personal example of people and situations that I've personally gone through on my path to growing wealthy. Today's story is, so is the world going to hell in a handbasket or is it not? Is it going to hell in a handbasket or is it not? You've got so many people out there that go, well, you know what? There's a lot of times that it is not doing anything at all. It just seems to be sitting still. It seems to be at a point where nobody is able to go ahead and do anything. And that's not absolutely true, because there's somewhere in the world that things are really going to pot, and there are some places in the world where things are just as as great as it can go. There's never a place where it's just going to go ahead and say this is the end, it's all downhill from here, without there being another place that is on its way up from the bottom and going from there. So this segment here, Tales from the Edge, is where what I want to go ahead and talk about, okay? Because this has happened countless times throughout history. I mentioned last time that the first time it happened was when Adam and Eve were booted out of the Garden of Eden. Okay, and that's basically what happened. They went out from their utopia and got placed into an area of the world that was completely different, and they had to work harder and move on in order to go ahead and prosper. And it's been happening ever since then for about the last 6,000 years. Now, if that's the case, what do we do? Where do we go from here? What can we do? And is the whole world in decline? Well, it's going to look like it from a certain point of view, okay? And if you're not thinking like the rich, then yes, the whole world looks like it's in decline, okay? But the uber rich right now are thinking exactly different. They're thinking that right now there's so much more that can be done, and they're already 15 steps ahead of everybody else. And therefore, they're talking and thinking in terms of metaverse and talking about exploration to Mars and mining the asteroid colony, or putting up a colony in the asteroids to be able to mine it. I mean, they're already thinking hundreds of years ahead of everybody else who's thinking, my God, how am I going to go ahead and get the gas to be able to go to the grocery store, to be able to go ahead and purchase food, to go ahead and put on my dinner for tonight and tomorrow's lunch? That's a completely different a mindset in doing so. So, yes, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And no, the world is not going to hell in a handbasket. I've got two books that I have been reading recently. The first one is called You Can Profit from a Monetary Crisis by Harry Browne. This one right here. And I've been looking at this one for about the last, I guess, month and a half to 2 months in doing so. I'm almost through with it at the moment. But the interesting thing is that it was written, and this is the revised version here, and it was written in 1975 for the revised version, or 1974 to be put out in 1975. The second one that I've been looking at recently is a really very good one, and it's called The New Great Depression: Winners and Losers in a Post-Pandemic World. And it was written by Jim Rickards, who is another favorite author of mine as well. The interesting thing is that both of these books say almost exactly the same thing, but they were written 50 years apart. They're talking about almost exactly the same thing. The only difference is that Harry Browne was saying right now, in the early 1970s, things are good and getting worse. And so you have to prepare yourself for the worsening and tightening restrictions that are coming up, so that when we go through this next depression and through this next huge recession and so on and so forth that he could see and forecast, then the people that went ahead and took his advice were able to go ahead and find themselves in a much better place. Okay. And he did not do it in terms of the gurus. He didn't say you have to go ahead and invest in a bunch of money into the stock market, or you have to go ahead and buy a bunch of real estate, or you have to only buy gold or silver, or you have to only go ahead and start thinking in terms of businesses. I mean, he went ahead and went through and even to the point of taking your currency and moving it out of the country for part of your currency, I should say, that you might have in your savings. He went through all of these things, and he did it from a point of view that was, here's what is possible. Here is what you need to do in that eventuality. And here are the risks that happen if you do it that you may not be comfortable with. The one thing that I love best about it is that he said, I cannot tell you how to invest, nor will I tell you how to invest. Why? Because your risk aversion is not the same as mine. The way you invest is not the same way as mine. All I can do is say, here's the facts, here's the figures, do with them as you will, even if it's nothing. I don't advise you to do nothing, but do with them as you will. Do what you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable and can only afford to buy a little bit of silver, buy this type of silver, buy this amount of silver to be able to get you through this next troubling period. If you can do the same thing with gold, do the same thing. If you can afford to buy businesses that are going to be worthwhile, then do so. If you want to go ahead and invest in real estate, great, go ahead and do so. But for each of those classes, he said, here are the problems. Here's what's going on. Here's what I see coming up. And hopefully it will not happen. But if it does, you're ready for it. And if it does not happen, then you're better prepared anyway. Now, Jim Rickards did basically the same thing with his book, The New Great Depression, but he went ahead and included the pandemic that came about, which really wasn't a pandemic. He included the tightening restrictions that Harry was talking about as well, in a new version or a new way about doing things. But he pretty much said the same thing. These are the asset classes you can invest in. And if you have any kind of money, you need to invest in these classes. It doesn't matter if you have only $5. Anybody can take $5 and invest into something. Okay. Now, I can vouch for that because back in 2012, 2013, 2014, I found myself to where I had retired, so to speak. And I'd retired young. I mean, I was in my mid 40s and doing so. I retired from a company that I decided I can go ahead and take out my money. I'm going to go ahead and live off those funds for a couple of years, and then we'll see what happens as we go along from there. Well, I found out very quickly that those retirement funds were, which I thought was going to last me 2 years, didn't even last 1 month. Okay. They didn't. And I mean, here's my mistake. All right. I took basically $30,000 and I didn't blow it. I didn't. I paid off bills. I went ahead and went out a couple of extra times, literally a couple of extra times a week to eat at restaurants that I enjoyed, but were not extravagant. Instead of going to a Mexican restaurant, I decided I was going to go to an Italian restaurant. That was it. Instead of going to an Italian restaurant, I went to a fish restaurant. That was it. It wasn't like I went up to Ruth Chris Steakhouse every single night, or Fogo de Chao here in Atlanta every single night, and ordered the most expensive thing I could possibly think of. No, I didn't do that at all. I went out 2 times more a week than I was used to doing so. And that was mainly because I didn't want to cook. I was being lazy. I paid off bills that I had. I went ahead and tried to put money into into my house that needed repairs. I tried to go ahead and pay off parts of my mortgage that I needed to go ahead and do and catch up on other things as well. And the next thing I knew, literally 30 days later, I went from $30,000 in my savings account to zero. That was my stupid mistake right there. My world was going to hell in a handbasket at that point. So when I started over again, I literally had nothing. I had no job. I had no savings. I had no income whatsoever. All I did was have a house that was getting worse and worse and worse. And I had to go ahead and declare bankruptcy to go ahead and get out of it and do other things as well, so I could move on from my life at that point. What did I do? Well, I started off by walking everywhere when I was then trying to go ahead and get another job. And every time I was there at that new job, I would start collecting extra change that people either left behind or I found on the sidewalk or something like that. And I went ahead and collected all that extra change. And literally it took what sometimes took me 2 weeks, sometimes took me 3 weeks. I would collect up enough change to get $20. I would take that $20 and sometimes I would go ahead and skip lunch and I would go ahead and use that. But every time I would get $20, I would go to the coin shop and I would switch it out for an ounce of silver, 1 ounce of silver at that point. And I did that again, and I did that again, and I did that again. And it came to the point where the people at the silver shop were going, okay, well, you're in here so regularly, we're going to go ahead and give you a discount on the silver when we can. And so sometimes that $20 in silver would get me 1 ounce of coin. Sometimes it would get me 1.5 ounces. Sometimes it would get me, a little bit less. Either way, they would try to go ahead and help me out where they could. And they would go ahead and help me by saying that you don't have to get just 1 ounce. You can break it down into little tenth ounces and work from there. So your $20 might get you 1 ounce here, but I can also give you 2/10 of an ounce in addition to it that will help you along from there. And literally, I slowly, but over the course of the next 3 years, built my savings back up again. It wasn't much. It wasn't much. It ended up being a little over $3,000 to go ahead and save up. But when you have nothing, sometimes that's what you have to do. Now, the nice thing is that I still have a lot. I don't have the same amount, but I still have a lot of coins that I hid from there. So if for whatever reason the US economy decides to go ahead and do a monetary reset and they've got to go back to a gold and silver backing, I'm prepared for that because my amount of savings that I've got could not just double, triple, it could actually go ahead and make itself 10 times more than it was worth. But if it doesn't, I've still got that amount in savings set aside for an emergency if I need it. I'm prepared one way if it goes great, and I'm prepared for another way if it really goes south and sour, and it will get even better for me. And that's what I want you to do. That's my tale from the edge. And I want you to remember that regardless of what you think is happening, whether it's in your own personal economy, whether you have a car or you don't, which means you got to go ahead and walk everywhere, whether you have a job or you don't, whether you have food on your table for that day or you don't, there is always a way it can be worse. There's always a way it can be better. Focus on how you can take your situation and make it better. Yes, it is a struggle. It's always a struggle, and it always will be a struggle. Even the very rich people, they struggle sometimes. They have to struggle with different things than we do. And sometimes we might go, well, I would love to have that struggle. Okay. So, like, for instance, I know I have a friend who says, my struggle is this: I've got all my bills paid, but if I stop right now, the government is going to take 80% of what I've got in one go. And I've just lost everything basically. And I've got to start all over again. My job, my problem is I have to take that 80% of income that I've got and put it somewhere so where the government will not take that chunk right there. They might take a little bit of that chunk. They might take 8% of that 80%. 10%, which equals out to 8%, but it's 8% is a lot easier to swallow losing than 80%. And I have to constantly move that money around into other areas to where it doesn't look like that I have it as income personally. And that's a problem sometimes if you don't know where to put it, if you don't know what to invest in, because once again, it's still possible to lose that 80%. But then the government's not going to give you back all 80%. They're only going to give you a small part of that or a portion of that up to a certain amount. And then you've lost the rest of it and gone from there. Somewhere, some way, somehow, the world is always going to hell in a handbasket. But it's always somewhere else getting better. You are listening to Standing on the Edge. When we come back, it's time to close out the show with What Would Happen If? Welcome back to the show. What Would Happen If is brought to you by DJR Enterprises. Today's topic for What Would Happen is if what you're doing isn't working, do something else. If what you're doing isn't working, do something else. Now, what do I mean by that? This one, believe it or not, is exactly what it sounds like. Because you can take this one statement and apply it to 1,000 different scenarios and make it work. If what you're doing isn't working, do something else. Okay. So now, if you were like I was back in 2013, 2014, and you were laying on your back because you were quote unquote retired and you really didn't want to do anything, you get lazy. You really get lazy. You sit around, you do nothing, you watch the television, you read books, you just kind of go, well, I don't want to go out and do anything. And therefore, you stay at home, you stay in bed, you sleep, you wander, you gain weight, you do all kinds of stuff, and you get cranky. You get cranky. My wife finally had to come out and tell me, you've got to go out and do something else because I can't stand how you are acting. I can't stand how you are treating myself and yourself and the kids and everything else. You're just literally looking for something to disagree with. And I had to come to the terms that she was right. I have to go ahead and do something else. This is what I'm talking about for you, okay? If you are, number one, first and foremost, if you don't have a job, go do something, okay? If it means you have to go and panhandle out at a bus station, if it means you have to go and look for handouts in front of a grocery store, do something. But at the same time, look to do something constructive as well, okay? If it means you got to go ahead and get food somewhere and you're able to go ahead and collect enough food for 1 hour, well, don't just stop there. Once you got the food, take it home, put it in the fridge, and then go back out and start looking for a job. It doesn't matter if the job is washing dishes. It doesn't matter if the job is mowing lawns. It doesn't matter if the job is doing laundry for people. It doesn't matter if it's tutoring somewhere. Something is better than nothing. Something is always better than nothing. Now, if you can't find the job, then I would suggest doing the small business or the side hustle, making money wherever you can. Whether it's, once again, you might be able to do this. I don't suggest it, but you might be able to do this. You can go ahead and go out and you can try to go ahead and get people to give you food. Not money, but give you food. And then you can turn around and try to sell that food to somebody else. Whether it's for what the grocery store would normally pay for it or sell it for, or if it's less than that, it doesn't matter, because if you got it for free and you're selling it for 5 cents, you've just made 5 cents that you didn't have. That's a side hustle. Now, you can do the same thing with mowing lawns. You can do the same thing with your tutoring services. You can go ahead and do the same thing by teaching art or consulting with other people. I mean, the numbers are endless that you can go ahead and do. You can always do something else. And you might not always have a paycheck at the end of the week, but you know something is coming because of your efforts. If you have nothing to do, nothing is going to come of your efforts because you didn't put forth the effort. Now, a lot of people think that rich people are lazy. And yes, there are some rich people that are lazy. But there's also a lot of poor people that are lazy. And there's a lot of middle-class people that are lazy. I was guilty of that myself. I mean, I'm still guilty of that myself in certain ways because I don't want to work my tail off. I don't want to work my fingers off for something that's only going to bring me a little bit of profit in some way. I would rather go ahead and work hard for a small amount of time and get the same amount of profit that I was making by working nearly 80 hours and working my bones off, literally, to be able to collect the same amount of money in my paycheck as I would otherwise. I mean, literally, I became a manager. I was a merchandise manager for Dollar Tree. Okay. They don't pay a lot of money. They don't. I think when I left them, I was making around $14 an hour. Now, that $14 an hour, we get paid every 2 weeks. So I would be making roughly around, after taxes, $600 for those 2 weeks. Okay. And that was working, again, 80 hours. Now, that was also knowing that I had to get up at before dawn. I had to be up at 3:30 in the morning to be able to be at work at 5 o'clock. I would work from 5 o'clock in the morning until about 2 to 3 in the afternoon. I was forced to stay in the store. I could not go out for lunch. I could not. I had to eat in the break room, so that way, if something happened, I was there in case of an emergency. Talk about being chained to your job. That's what happened. Okay. And like I said, after taxes, I was making about $600 for 2 weeks. Now, that was not bad, but it was certainly not great either. Flip flop that to today, where if I decide to do so as a DJ, then I can make the exact same amount of money before taxes and keep 100% of that, and only work. This is careful. You got to listen to this carefully. I only have to work physically 2 hours, 4 days a week. Now, there's a little more than that also. Okay. I mean, it means that I've got to drive to and from the area, but I would have to drive to and from work as well. So that kind of sort of cancels itself out. I have to go ahead and prepare beforehand. I have to prepare my music. I have to prepare the questions that I'm doing. I have to prepare and set up and break down. Okay. So all in all, it's a total of 4 hours for each session. If I go ahead and do that. All right. Now, 4 times a week, that's 16 hours that I'm doing. 16 hours. That means that I'm working 5% of the time that I did at the Dollar Tree and making the exact same amount of money. But even better than that, I've got the government on my side that are saying that because you now have your own business doing this, we're going to give you certain tax breaks. We're going to go ahead and allow you to claim your mileage. We're going to allow you to claim the food that you eat to a certain extent. We're going to go ahead and allow you to go ahead and take your expenses that you've got if you've got to buy new speakers or new microphones or new cables or anything like that, and we'll let you take it back again. We will go ahead and give that back to you off your taxes. So in all reality, not only am I working only 5% of what I did and making the same amount of money, I'm actually working 5% of the time that I did prior to that and making more than I would have working 80 hours a week at the Dollar Tree. And this is great all the way around. So if what you're doing isn't working, do something else. Think of something new. Think of something that you're able to go ahead and utilize that's going to be a lot better for you in the long run, and not just where you think you're going to go ahead and get better by working a second job or by working a harder at your job. Okay? Start thinking like the rich in every way that you can. So that way you can join me on the edge later on. I want to thank everybody for going ahead and watching this show today. You've been listening to Standing on the Edge. Here's a shout out to my best friend Lee, who's been watching me throughout this session as well. I want to go ahead and remind you, if you want to be a partial sponsor of this particular channel, Standing on the Edge, do me a favor, go ahead and send me an email to joinmeattheedge@gmail.com. joinmeattheedge@gmail.com. You can send me a text at 470-554-2134, or you can go ahead and look me straight up on the GoFundMe page. And if you go ahead and if you send me an email or you call me or text me, I will actually give you the information to the GoFundMe page. $1 is all it takes to be a partial sponsor for this show that will allow it to go ahead and continue moving on and keep going every single week. My next show is going to be next Thursday, January 20th at noon. But until then, I want you to expand your awareness. Think of something every day to help you on your own path. And hopefully soon, I'll see you joining me on the edge. Have a great weekend.